Hi and welcome back to Neural Splendor. Tonight we're going to talk about how to inspect your Holeset turbocharger. These turbochargers are found on ISXs, QSLs, QSBs, ISBs, ISLs, L9, mid-range and heavy-duty engine. The first thing we're going to take a look at is the bearing end play and side play. For the record, the end play, which is if you grab both sides of the turbo and put your index finger on each end of the turbo shaft. One end is the intake impeller, the other end is the exhaust impeller. You should barely be able to feel any movement back and forth. Typically, this is going to be about 1.5 to 3 or 4 thousandths. You can check for your particular turbo, but it's very small amount of movement. The side play, that's a different story. Typically, you're allowed as much side play as you have until you can press the impeller sideways and hear it scraping against the housing. The reason for that is this: the bearings on that shaft float in oil films, so they self-center themselves, and that is one of the ways that they're able to get a turbo to spin up to about 109,000 RPM over and over and not have an issue, and the bearings last much longer. So it's a very good design. Again, oil pressure is what centers the bearing inside of the bearing saddle. That's why when the engine is not running, it seems we have excessive side play on our turbo. The next thing we're going to look at is the impellers. You're going to be looking for dings, bent fins, chunks missing. We'll have an example of good impellers and failed impellers. And then the last thing we'll take a quick look at is the rack, if it's a VGT turbo. And the particular turbo we're looking at, the factory has been nice enough to scribe stop lines right in the top of the housing, and you'll see those stop lines. And that rack has to just edge up to those stop lines. It really shouldn't cover them completely, just edge up to them, but it has to make that full travel, or there could be something wrong in the base of the VGT. We're not going to take a look at the VGT motor. We'll do that in another video because that's its own beast, and we're going to take a look at that separately. So let's take a look at your turbo and see if visually it passes reuse guidelines. Here we're looking at a brand new turbo intake impeller. The nut is ground for balance, and as you can see, nice straight edges, no nicks, no dings, nothing bent. Here we have an intake impeller that is chewed up. You can see the bent edges, missing pieces. You can see the scarring inside the aluminum compressor housing. So this turbo failed while at a high rate of speed. This is an exhaust impeller, and you can see the color in it. That's a normal color. That's a good looking impeller. There's no dings, no dents, nothing bent. Now here I've grabbed the other side of the turbo, the intake impeller, and I'm moving it side to side. You can notice how much movement there is, quite a bit. And this is normal, and when I rotate it, it does not scrape the housing. This is the rack lever on this particular type of turbo. The levers can look slightly different. And as you can see, I'm able to easily move it with my thumb and forefinger stop to stop. As it travels, there's no tight spots. There's no excessive force needed. And inscribed in this housing are 2 machine slots. The rack lever has to butt just up against them, as you saw there. So remember, when you're inspecting your turbo, you need to look for cracks in the exhaust housing, the center housing. Check all the threaded holes where your water and oil lines go. Check the top where the VGT bolts down. Make sure there's no cracks or dings. Make sure your rack lever moves free. Here we see the VGT motor bolted on a turbo. I use this picture because The turbo's all rusty and the VGT motor is red. It's been replaced. And the VGT motor is going to be our discussion in a future video. So, thanks again for joining me at Neural Splendor. See you next time.